What's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's Podcast. My name is Brian Brosey. I'm joined by my friend and co-host Keone Tita. Keone, how are you?
I'm doing great, Brian. How are you? Hey, everybody out there. Brian and I want to talk about one particular food product or food that is especially dear to my heart and to most Italians and Latin Americans around the world, and that is the tomato and what the health benefits are of the tomato.
So we're talking all
So,
things big, red, juicy tomatoes today.
Yep, and we are talking. There are tomatoes that are yellow and green and so, but we're gonna focus on the red tomato, the ones that are red, because why? Because they seem to have the most health benefit, mainly due to a particular compound called lycopene. So we'll talk about that. But let thy food be thy medicine, and that's Hippocrates, the father of medicine. He said that long ago, thousands of years ago, and that's really dear to a naturopathic physician's heart. People that are discussing whole foods and holistic physicians, and it's really pertinent today because we live in a world where drugs and yes, supplements dominate, and we seem to forget about the healing power of whole foods. And today we're particularly going to talk about the tomato. And the reason we are is because it's a number of reasons. First of all, it's powerhouse of nutrition. It contains a multitude of vitamins and minerals. It is health has so many health giving products due to science. What we've seen there. And it is a staple, a food staple around the world, especially in Italy and places like Mexico and other places in Latin America. So I think it's really worth talking about. And I think even more so, we should discuss it because there are some things going around the internet world that are like, tomatoes are bad for you. And one of the reasons why people think tomatoes are bad for you, at least on the internet, is because they contain a compound called lectins. So we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
But so let's go about a little bit into the history of the tomato. A lot of people maybe not realize this, but the tomato plant is not native to Italy. It's actually native to South America, and it was introduced in Europe sometime around the 1500s when the Spanish were going through South America. And it arrived in Europe, and then that's when it became kind of like a staple food of especially Southern Europe. And again, the Italians are especially known for their love of the tomato. I think part of the reason why tomatoes get a bad rap is because they are part of the nightshade family, and many nightshade plants are deadly, and the tomato plant is actually poisonous, especially if you ate the leaves and the stems and stuff. But the actual fruit of that plant, the tomato, is not.
So what is the nightshade family? I've never heard that term.
So nightshades are it's the ones that we have in our diet. You can think about are like eggplant is a
Okay.
nightshade. Peppers are nightshades.
So far, I like all these a lot.
Yeah, tomatoes are nightshades, and potatoes are an example of nightshade vegetables. And nightshades do have compounds in there that can be toxic, and it's especially true if you're eating the green parts of those plants. Other things, highly toxic nightshade family plants are things like belladonna is a nightshade plant, if I'm not mistaken. And
So it's just a classification based
yeah,
off.
it's a classification.
Okay.
And speaking of nightshades, right now, some some people do very well health-wise, especially people with like autoimmune conditions or arthritis, by avoiding all nightshades, whether cooked or not. So, you know, when you run into that, like I've had a number of patients over the years where part of their issue was they were just over consuming nightshade vegetables like eggplant, peppers, and tomatoes and stuff. And as soon as we reduced that load on them of the nightshades and told them to avoid it, their symptoms got better. Now that doesn't mean that these nightshades cause problems for everybody,
Okay.
and it also speaks to the fact that if you're eating something every day, day in and day out, it's more likely that you're going to develop a food sensitivity or maybe even an outright allergy to these foods.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so the Latin name of tomatoes is called Lycophyrsicum, Lycopersicum, which basically means wolf peach, and it gives that name in itself kind of gives the false reputation of being toxic. The wolf being the big bad animal that causes problems. But in fact, it's just a tomato leaf that is toxic, and it's not the tomato itself or the fruit.
Okay. So don't eat the leaves, but eat the plump stuff.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And so, the tomato seems to have more health-giving benefits, at least according to science. The redder it is. So when you actually, let's say you make tomato sauce, the other thing is the more you cook it, the more of the good stuff you get in it, right? So
okay.
The cooking actually does a number of things to decrease lectin content, but also increases content of a star player in the tomato called lycopene. And there are many beneficial compounds in tomato, but lycopene is kind of like the poster child of, the main product, so the active constituent, the one that's been most researched in the tomato. And it has favorable benefits in helping to treat or is highly correlated with helping with things like prostate and breast cancer. The higher the content that is consumed, it seems like these rates go down in people. Oral, esophageal, pancreatic, cervical cancer, bladder cancer. It also has been shown it's a very powerful antioxidant, so it's been shown to lower the oxidation of LDL cholesterol. So oxidized cholesterol is really the bad cholesterol for you, not just regular cholesterol. Like if cholesterol is being exposed to tons of free radicals, that's when it becomes a little bit more dangerous. So the oxidation of cholesterol, lycopene prevents that, thus making cholesterol benign, right? So in that case, it can reduce heart disease.
Yeah, really helpful to a lot of people.
Right, and it will also, again, increase the resistance to cancers, and it also has some evidence shown that it will reduce the incidence of exercise-induced asthma. So the more this compound you consume, if you're prone to that, to exercise-induced asthma, I mean, this is a good way to use food to help prevent that.
Mm-hmm.
There's even evidence that lycopene can help prevent cataracts, age-related macular degeneration. And this is one of my favorites, and this is true. Like, one of the best ways to help prevent sunburns is to eat a high phytonutrient diet. Well, lycopene in itself, the higher the lycopene, and here's something real interesting. Lycopene and many of the carotenoids, lycopene is a carotenoid compound, will deposit in the skin. And by doing that, it will prevent sunburn. So it's the best sunscreen, and I call it internal sunscreen for people. So people who eat lots of lycopene and or phytonutrients, certain compounds in plant foods, they get better protection from sunburns than they would by lathering themselves all up with sunscreen.
Wow, that's super interesting. And it makes sense when you just generally think about it. Like in the Caribbean, what type of food do you think of? You think of all those colorful fruits and things like that. So it makes sense.
Right. So and that's a good point, because if a lot of these foods that are very high in antioxidants, right, they sit in the sun all day, especially if they're around the equator. I mean, it's like 20, almost like at least 12 hours of sun all the time. And because of that, these plants and these fruits and vegetables have high antioxidants because they have to protect themselves from the radiation, the ultraviolet rays from the sun.
Mm.
And then when we consume these, it then protects us against the radiation from the sun.
Yeah, truly, let food be thy medicine. That's
Right,
awesome.
right. You know, um, so lycopene is one of those things that it's just one compound in the tomato that is is really powerful in helping prevent disease and boost our health. But lycopene is not just found in tomato. I mean, the tomato tends to have, one of the highest concentrations of it. But it's also found in things that have that red color. So like watermelon, guava, grapefruit, papaya has a little bit, and apricots have a little bit of it also. But tomatoes, you really get a good concentration of it because when you cook the tomato, the concentration, and you have like tomato sauce, or tomato paste, even better, the concentration of lycopene goes way up. And probably the highest food product, the best lycopene concentration would be tomato paste, or for Americans, what's the tomato product we eat most of is the condiment ketchup, and that has a lot of lycopene in it. And it makes me wonder. It just makes me wonder that if tomato products were taken out of the diet altogether, the American diet, would disease rates be worse? And I would say
Mm.
yes. So if you're going to have pizza, not having it with tomato sauce takes away some of the health-giving properties. And so one of the things I like to do especially when I'm having pizza, is I will take tomato paste and spread it on that pizza like butter, and it's delicious, man. It's delicious. And it's just regular tomato paste.
Mhm.
Just cook, it's not, I don't even cook it. I just put it on the pizza and it's incredible. And the other thing that's really, really interesting about what the Italians do, and also the Mexicans, when they eat their tomato products, they usually eat them with some sort of fat. So you think about the Italians using olive oil, right,
Yeah.
in their tomato sauce. And then you can think about the Mexicans using, I don't know, think about guacamole and, with salsa.
Hmm.
And the fats in the guacamole and the olive oil help the absorption of these products, these compounds into tomato, lycopene, get absorbed into our body. So eating fat with your tomato sauce is great. So that's why, having pizza with cheese on it, fat used to be the bad thing, but having some fat in there helps absorb these things. And if you don't have the fat in there, you don't absorb a lot of these really health-giving compounds.
Right. Similar with our multivitamins episode where we discussed that.
Yeah,
Just
so if you're
yeah.
taking a multivitamin, right, you definitely, to get the benefit of it, it's best to take it with food. So it helps increase the absorption of that. So we get the tomato. The reason why I really wanted to do this episode is because the tomato can be, especially with tomato sauce, can be a great carrier for a whole lot of other beneficial compounds. So I'm gonna give away some ancient family secrets here, and we're gonna just real quickly go over how to make a really health-giving tomato sauce. All right.
All right.
So this is a really valuable podcast,
Yeah.
and my father's gonna be really upset at me for giving away
Yeah, they get a
some of these.
blessing to do this
Yeah,
podcast.
I know.
They
Yeah.
go visit some grave somewhere
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Italy
yeah.
or
That's right,
do
right.
some flowers.
I got to do a little ritual to my ancient ancestors because this recipe was passed down through many years, many ancient years. But however, so tomato sauce. Right now is the season of tomatoes here in the United States. So one of the ways to that I like to make tomato sauce is to start with the sauce is, first of all, you need a big pot, the biggest pot you can get, because you want to make tons of sauce because you're going to be using it a lot. So making a little bit of sauce is heresy. Going out to the store and getting canned or jarred tomato sauce, that's heresy too. You need to make it yourself. So this is a way to start off making and get the most benefit out of your tomato sauce. So I like to, cover the pot, the bottom of the pot with olive oil, and then you throw like a little half can of tomato paste in there, and then you cut up some garlic and throw that in there and let it kind of saute. All right. So you just let it cook there because you want that olive oil to take in some of the compounds and the lycopene from the
The
tomato
paste.
paste, and then also to get some of the garlic compounds in there also. So you let that just go, and then you can make your tomato sauce one of two ways. Now, I have some patients who every year they know that I love the tomatoes, so I get like, I mean, seriously, sometimes trash bag fulls of tomatoes, and you don't really need that much, but like, I'll get at least like 20 tomatoes at one time. And I'm kind of lazy. I don't like taking the skin off the tomato, but unless I have the time, but I just, kind of cut the tops off the tomato. And if there's any bad parts, take those off the tomato. And I just throw them all in the pot there with the skin and everything. All right.
All right. So how far removed are we from the paste and
So we're about 10 to 15 minutes in while you're
cool.
letting that simmer on low heat, and then you throw the tomatoes in there, and tomatoes are mostly water. So what you'll see as those tomatoes cook down, that you'll see that you start seeing the sauce come about. But if you're throwing raw tomatoes in there, that means that you should probably let that sauce cook for about, I don't know, at least 4 hours, sometimes 8 hours on low heat, like all day. And once those tomatoes cook down, we're about an hour or two in, then I would probably add some of my other ingredients that add a lot of beneficial compounds there. And that would be things like basil, oregano, a little bit of pepper. Sometimes I like my sauce a little bit spicy. So sometimes I'll throw in a little bit of chili pepper in there, and maybe a little bit of onion powder. And but the main ingredients tend to be really just garlic and basil and the tomatoes, and really a sauce with that alone is going to turn out to be really, really good. So what else do people like to throw in there? You can throw in there, if you wanted to, fennel, but it will change the taste a little bit. Maybe thyme you can throw in there, but the basic ingredients for me at least are going to be basil, oregano, black pepper, a little bit of chili pepper, and of course you already put your garlic in there, but you can put a whole lot more garlic in there. And by the way, to get the most benefit from the garlic, you want to crush it and really like chop it up fine and throw it in there.
Okay.
And so you just let that cook for about, anywhere from 4 to 8, 10, 12 hours on low heat. And there you go. That's real simple tomato sauce. Now, notice I did not say, well, you should use this much pepper, this much that. Really, it's you need to start off small with those things, and then add what you want in there. If you're using raw tomatoes, you're probably going to want to add salt in there too.
Mhm.
Okay, because it's going to taste a little bit bland without that. But again, you make it to your taste, and by
Mhm.
cooking it all day, it's great. So when you're cooking it all day, you want to make sure you're stirring it. You don't want it to burn at the bottom, but you are going to have it on low heat, medium heat, and you just want to get to the point where it has a mild, at least initially you can get it boiling a little bit, and then turn it down to low heat and just cook it all day, but make sure you're stirring it.
Okay. Okay. So it really seems that the key is heating it up. To
Yep.
get all these compounds, it really needs to be cooked.
It needs to be cooked to get the most out of your tomato. You wanna cook it. Like raw tomatoes are great, and I definitely like those in salads and stuff. But again, the lycopene content really isn't there. There's not a whole lot there in that. Although I mean I like raw tomatoes myself, but much rather have them into tomato sauce.
Okay.
So 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 that's a real simple way to actually make a really health giving
Hmm.
food product. And if you make a lot of it, there's so many things you can do with it. So you can add, once it's done and you have a ton of tomato sauce, you can just store it and freeze it and use it as you need, and then you can add other things in it. So you can you could cook pasta, and then take some tomato sauce out of the freezer, and now you have some pasta and tomato sauce. You can make pasta fagioli, which is pasta and beans. So you can make beans, and that's an Italian dish too. That with tomato sauce, it
What
goes
kind of
great.
beans are they using?
You can use any beans. A
Hmm.
lot of times, people that make I think the Southern Italians call it pasta fagioli, but I think correct Italian is pasta fagioli, and so depending on where you come from, but in Italy, but any type of bean will work. You can use
Okay.
kidney beans, you can use white beans, you can use I don't know, the black beans, any type of bean, pinto beans. They all taste good. It's a good. I actually prefer it more than pasta
Okay.
using the beans. But then you can also cook it like a just make a soup out of it too, right?
Hmm.
Just cook it and eat that. Um, so there's lots of things you can do with it. So that's a real simple way to make tomato sauce. Now there's I just want to, because I know if Jillian was here, my wife, listening to this, she'd be like, "Oh man, you're telling people to make tomato sauce the worst way. You never put tomato skins in the sauce." And it's kind of like the lazy man's way of making tomato sauce. So a lot of times people will take the skins out, and the way to do that is real simple. You just get some hot water that's been boiled, and you just dunk the tomato in there for a second, and the skin comes right off, right? And
Okay.
then you can throw your tomatoes in there. And then I have an aunt who Jillian's aunt, who would think it's heresy to do the tomatoes and have the seeds still in the tomatoes. So and this makes it more of a sweeter type sauce where you actually strain the tomato seeds out, and then you take the skins off and you strain the tomato seeds out, and then just get the tomato without the seeds or the skin, and cook it that way. So there's all different types of ways to do it, but usually when I want something quick and easy, and that's the way I do it. And if I have tons of tomatoes, I'm just not going to spend the time taking the skins and seeds out, because it will add, like, I don't notice it, but other people might notice it, that a slight bitterness to the sauce. One thing I don't do, just because I can't stand it, is I will not add sugar to the tomato sauce. So a lot of Italians will add like a little bit of sugar there, because they say it takes some of the I don't even know what they mean by this, the acidity and the bitterness out of the sauce. But I certainly won't do that. And let me tell you a story. One of the reasons I won't do that. So growing up in the South in North Carolina, I hung out with friends who knew I grew up, at least culturally, Italian American, and grew up with tomato sauce. Well, some of my Southern friends would be, "Oh, let's go. My mom's making pasta," and it was always like usually an experience that was terrible for me. It was like a nightmare experience. And let me just tell you some of the things that I was exposed to with the tomato sauce. It's awful. So I would go to their house, and they would cook the pasta in such a way that it turned into mush. I mean, it's just
Uh-huh.
mush. And then the sauce, guess what the sauce was? It was one of two versions. It was just cut up raw tomatoes diced on the pasta. I mean, what is that? That's ridiculous. And then I went to this place. This was a restaurant. So my friend, his family out in Raleigh, when I was going to college, I went to this restaurant, and he goes, "Yeah, Mom, the restaurant, the food of the day, we're having pasta and sauce." So I go there. I say, "Oh, that's great. Let's go." And so I go there. So the pasta's overcooked, and then guess what the sauce was? It was just ketchup. It was ketchup on the sauce, which, I mean,
That's insulting.
yeah.
At a
Oh,
restaurant.
it's totally insulting. It's awful. I mean, and it put me off. I mean, I was just like, after that experience, I never wanted to go out and eat tomato sauce anywhere else, except unless I knew what the person's ancestry was and where they came from. I just wasn't going to do it. And the other thing is, it's very hard growing up in North Carolina, as you did, to find a very good Italian restaurant that makes sauce. I mean, if I want to have good tomato sauce, I'm going to go to my parents' house. I'm not going to go to a restaurant. I just haven't had any good tomato sauce. There are exceptions, but I haven't found it. It's hard to find, as opposed to if you're up in New York and New Jersey, that area where there's a very high concentration of Italians. You usually can find a good tomato sauce. You certainly can find better pizza and stuff like that up there. But but yeah, I've been traumatized by some of the sauce that I've been exposed to. But those were some of my worst experiences.
It's always terrible when you go out to eat and you're it's worse than what you make at home. You're paying more or whatever.
Yeah. And the other thing I have to say is, people, don't overcook the pasta. The pasta, don't overcook it. The pasta should be chewy, as the Italians say, al dente. It should, to the tooth. It should be chewy. It should not be mush.
Okay. All
So
right. Taking notes. Taking notes. Got to be very careful when you have Keone for dinner. We'll end up on the podcast.
yeah,
With a
that's no
story of
kidding.
future eggplant podcast.
That's right. So what else does tomato sauce, tomatoes have in it? Well, it's an excellent source of vitamin C, all right, which we all know is a great antioxidant. It also contains an abundance of other carotenoids besides lycopene, like beta carotene, thus making it a rich source of vitamin A. Beta carotene gets converted to vitamin A in the body. And these two compounds, vitamin C and beta carotene, we know that they help prevent atherosclerosis, plaquing in the arteries, diabetes, cancers, and asthma. And the other thing about the tomato is it's very rich in fiber, and fiber works in concert with these vitamins like vitamin C and A against these diseases that we've already mentioned.
There's a benefit of leaving the skin in there. You're not being lazy. You're adding fiber.
You're definitely adding fiber. But it's for some people, for some Italians, that's heresy, and it doesn't. Sometimes when you see skin floating around in your tomato sauce, people don't. Some Italians don't like that. Actually, to me, it's delicious either way. It's like a lot of vegetables, very high in potassium and minerals, B vitamins, and one thing about potassium, especially if you're eating high vegetables, tomatoes are very high in it. Potassium is one of those minerals that can help lower blood pressure. So there's a lot of things in there in the tomato that can really help against, disease, sunburn, and all the stuff we mentioned. Now, let's get to a pet peeve of mine, because I see this on the internet all the time, and I know that we're going to have people going like, but, I heard tomatoes are high in lectins, okay? And lectins are poisonous to the body. And no, lectins are not, especially when you cook the food. So what are lectins? Lectins are proteins that bind like carbohydrates, that they're carbohydrate binding proteins, and they help with cell signaling, and they work at a cellular molecular level, play numerous roles in biological recognition and phenomena. But anyway, tomatoes, especially uncooked tomatoes, are high in lectins, and these lectins can cause problems for some people. Hence what we are talking about with people eating nightshade vegetables like the eggplant, the peppers, and stuff. A lot of the problem may be due to lectins in those foods. Okay. However, when you cook the foods, the lectin content goes way, way down. So think about another food compound that is very high in lectins that has gotten a bad rap also are legumes, like beans and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yes, beans are toxic to the body, especially if you eat them raw. That's why you cook them. So you'll see in the paleo diet, like, beans are bad because, our modern day, our hunter-gatherer ancestors and modern day hunter-gatherers don't eat them. Well, why don't they eat them? Because if you eat them raw, you're going to have severe digestive discomfort. Most people will. Right. So you have to cook these things down to get rid of the lectins. And there are some doctors out on the internet sphere who are talking about people should be eating a lectin-free diet. Well, you eat a lectin-free diet, that means basically you've taken out almost all the vegetables and grains and legumes out of the diet, and you're left with nothing but meat and dairy and just animal products. And so when I hear stuff like that, where certain foods like tomatoes are vilified, and there's actually a doctor out there who's saying, oh, don't eat tomatoes because they're terrible for you. He'd probably be assassinated if he walked the streets of Italy and said that. But no, they wouldn't like him. Let's just put it lightly. They would not like him. And certainly let's not tell the Godfathers of the Mafia about that. But anyway, tomatoes are a health food. Let's just put it that way. And yes, they do contain lectins. And for some people, lectins can be can be a problem for people, but when you cook the foods, the lectin content goes down. So
And so the problem with the lectin is the digestive stress.
yeah, you'll have digestive stress. Sometimes you see they may contribute to autoimmune diseases and things like
Okay.
that. High lectin diets, especially eating raw foods, you just don't, primarily you won't digest them well.
Okay.
And yes, the first symptoms are going to be digestive stress. So eating like um, beans that have not been cooked a lot of times those things, like when I hear like people say, oh, I can't eat beans at all, they make me very gassy. A lot of times, not always, but a lot of times is because they're eating beans that are undercooked
Mm-hmm.
that make them that way. If you cook the beans and make sure they're really cooked through, they should be very, very soft. And a lot of times that they're not going to make you very gassy.
Yeah, and wash them off. Get them out of all that gunk in that can.
Yeah. Oh
That's
yeah.
something I see too. And then people complain about the gastric distress, and it's like we poured it directly from the can into the pot, and it's just coming
Right.
out like a clump of soup. And
Right. And well, you bring up, you know what, you actually bring up a good point, because to me, like I don't eat beans out of the can. I get
Mhm.
dried beans at the food store and I soak them
Okay,
overnight, and to make sure they're really cooked thoroughly, then once I soak them overnight, I'll put them in a pressure cooker and cook them for like 30 to 40 minutes in a type of pressure cooker that makes them very, very, very soft. And usually the dried beans, when you cook them that way, they give you less of a problem than the beans that are coming out of a can. And for me also, I don't like doing tomato sauce out of a can. Again, cans used to have some lead content in them, not anymore. But now, we have a problem with uh, a compound called BPA. Some of these cans are plastic lined, and you get some of these chemicals from the plastic, like BPA, in there into the tomato sauce. So if I'm going to buy tomatoes at a food store, I really go out of my way and spend the extra dollar to buy them in glass jars, you
okay,
know, or I get them raw. But not, I don't want to make people neurotic, because to me, whether you eat the tomatoes out of a can or not, you're still getting tremendous health benefit from them. And to me, and the advantages of eating tomato sauce or tomato products far outweigh the disadvantages of maybe having like BPA in there. But if and when you can, try to eat them out of glass jars. That way you're getting the tomato products out of there. And again, for me, and it's my taste, I just have not found a jarred tomato sauce that I like at all. They're usually too sweet or too salty.
hmm
So and they have other stuff in it that I just don't like. And I also, I'll go out of my way to try to get organic, canned or jarred tomatoes.
yeah,
So um, so what else? Like I was saying before, I feel like tomato sauce especially is like, you can make a wonderful medicine cabinet out of it by adding all these other compounds in there. Like garlic and oregano are very, very potent antimicrobial agents, and in my opinion, you never can put too much garlic in tomato sauce.
hmm
And you really do want to like I like getting the raw garlic. I don't like using garlic powder, but I like getting the raw garlic, crushing the cloves and chopping it finely and just throwing it in there. Sometimes I'll use a bulb or two of garlic in my tomato sauce, but some people may not like that much garlic. They may just want a clove or two in there, which either way is fine. You make it to taste. Um, Garlic has been shown to help lower cholesterol. It's actually been documented to help decrease blood pressure. So it's a great herb to put in tomato sauce. Another powerful compound that's found in both rosemary and oregano is rosmarinic acid, and that's shown to help. It's actually shown to be very beneficial for the cardiovascular system. It's actually been shown to be very beneficial for the brain also, and then it's a very powerful antioxidant. You throw basil in there, you're getting some of the same benefits in there. There's compounds in there called orientin and vincinin. Those compounds have very powerful antimicrobial effects, and also another compound found in, I think, oregano and both basil is eugenol. You can actually do PubMed searches on these and see all the benefits that come up with these compounds that are found in these herbs that you can put into tomato sauce. And they all play a role. And here's the thing is, especially in Chinese medicine, the whole thing is when you have a mix of these herbs, and plants like tomatoes and all these herbs put in there, they all give you a interconnected beneficial effect on the body, the way they interact. I mean, even low pepper that most Americans are familiar with, putting in the tomato sauce adds tremendous benefit to the body. And you're talking about a antioxidant soup. You're talking about an internal sunscreen that really helps promote health in the body. So all the Italian spices you can think about throwing in there, and that's the way I like to make my tomato sauce. I'd usually try to throw all of them in there: garlic, oregano, parsley, rosemary. All those things in there have tremendous benefit and are very, very anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, what I love about it, and this is something that really it put me to, I'm a Dolce Diet coach. It put me towards the Dolce Diet when I was like 17 or 18, was just that everything you listed there is a delicious spaghetti dinner. And it's like comfort food, but it's super healthy comfort food, or it's
Right.
putting in as much health benefits as you can in this comfort food. And it doesn't, so, eating super healthy doesn't have to be this bland tofu squares of unknown type of food that just tastes like crap. And it's just taking it back a step and actually preparing your own food of these great natural healthy foods that we can get from our backyard.
Right.
And
right.
there, and then those are what's really beneficial and what really creates a rich diet.
Yeah, and you can also, it depends on the proportion of sauce to these other foods that may come with that food. So for example, if you are making pasta, right? Well, of course, if you want to eat lower carb, then don't do as much pasta and just drown your pasta in sauce. I mean, for me, the sauce is much better than the pasta. And unfortunately, at many restaurants here, I guess due to cutting costs or whatever, especially Italian American restaurants, you get a huge plate of pasta and it's just a little bit of sauce. It ought to be the other way around. It ought to be a big bowl of sauce and you don't see the pasta in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the pasta's drowned in the sauce, or the legumes are drowned in the beans are drowned in the sauce. So you really want to look at your food about the proportions of it, where you don't have to forgo the pasta. You don't have to forgo the legumes or anything like that. You don't even have to forgo the good Italian bread. It's just, have higher amounts of the good stuff,
right?
Like the olive oil and the sauce. And, one of the diets out there that, has tons and tons of research on it as far as being very, very healthy is the Mediterranean diet. Well, tomato sauce is part of the Mediterranean diet. Olive oil is part of the Mediterranean diet. All those herbs that we mentioned are part of the Mediterranean diet. And the reason why it's so healthy for us is because of all those things in there. The Mediterranean diet is not a pasta diet. It's a diet full of plant-based phytochemicals. So,
right.
So when you hear the Mediterranean diet, it doesn't mean, go have a free-for-all on bread and pasta.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point.
So, all right. So when we've been talking about all the health benefits of the tomato, but, are there any possible adverse effects of consuming tomatoes, right? Are there any problems that you can have from consuming too many tomato products? Well, tomatoes, unless you have an allergy to them, and some people can, and some people, if you eat a ton of a certain food over years, sometimes you'll develop an allergy to certain foods. And actually, I think this is unfortunate, but I think my grandmother, like later on in life, actually developed an allergy to tomatoes, and it was just because having it day in and day out. And that would go with any food. So there's nothing inherent about the tomato that made it bad for her. It's just, you can't eat the same food every single day in high amounts and expect it not to have a problem.
It was her Italian heritage that was bad. It wasn't the tomato. The upbringing.
Yeah, and think about that. An Italian not being able to eat their tomatoes because they have an allergy. I mean, that's awful. I mean, that's one of the worst things that can happen to, to an Italian.
It's clipping a
But
butterfly's wings.
that's right. That's exactly right. But there are some things that's actually happened to me with tomatoes, and so if you eat a ton of tomato products over and over again, you can turn yourself orange or look like you have a fake tan on, so to speak.
Huh.
And because the thing about tomatoes is those compounds can deposit in the skin, okay, and will add some red pigment to the skin. Well, you're actually going to be, by that happening to you, you're actually going to be protected better from the sun than somebody who hasn't. But still, it's not a problem. It just can make you look a little bit orange, and you'll see it appear in your palms, or in the soles of your feet, that you have too much of this lycopene or some of the carotenoids in your body from eating a lot of tomatoes and other plant compounds that have a lot of these in there. I think the medical name is lycopeninemia. So it's just an overabundance of lycopene in the body. There's nothing dangerous about it. You just may look like
a Guido.
Yeah, or Donald Trump. Yeah, or Donald Trump for a little while. But just take a break from your tomato products, and that will go away. So what else? What else about tomatoes, Brian? I know you're going to run out now. You're going to make a big pot of tomato sauce, right?
I am. I'm ashamed that I'm not actually making tomato sauce now. We're making the salad this week,
and you should be ashamed.
Yeah,
you should be.
after that, well, I'm ashamed of how I make it, so I'm not even going to start to delve into how I make it or if I add any sugar or anything like that. I certainly will take the sugar out.
In fact, Brian, I'm not going to do this podcast with you anymore if you don't start making tomato sauce every weekend. All right, like I do. Okay.
In preparation, I'll start it before the podcast. So it cooks for the whole 10.
Eat it while we're on the podcast.
Yeah, got to give it the time. Sit there for 10, 12 hours, lightly stirring it. I can picture you with your apron on and all that kind of stuff, not cutting the skin off the tomatoes.
That's right. So let's so everybody out there, let's don't bad talk the tomato anymore. Really, it hurts my feelings. So don't talk bad about the tomato anymore. It's an incredible food. It can be very, 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 very healthy for you. And
for the lectin, how does the body get rid of that? Like, let's say, so that doctor, whoever is claiming that the lectin can kind of build up from the tomato and negatively affect you. How do we clear lectin? Do we clear it just like we do everything else?
Yeah, I mean, your body will mount an immune response to that and get rid of it. And so if you're having like severe digestive discomfort, usually that will pass, right?
Okay. And that's your sign that you had a lot of lectin, or
it could be. Yes, okay. It could be. That's usually it's going to affect the digestive tract first, okay? But the best way to prevent an overabundance of lectins in your body is by just making sure you cook your food and your food thoroughly, especially your legumes. I mean, lectins are ubiquitous in the plant world, and it's ubiquitous in the foods that we eat. And having a little bit is not harmful to your body at all.
Yeah, I mean, soy lectin is that similar? Soy lectin?
Yeah,
supplement that people
Well,
eat.
no, that's soy lecithin. That's a fatty compound. But that's a different thing. However, there are lectins in soy. So eating raw soybeans will give you a higher amount of lectins in it. But lecithin is a whole different compound, and that's a fatty phospholipid that they extract from the soybean that you find in a number of foods, which, by the way, is really not problematic. I mean, most people have a sensitivity to soy or allergic to soy. A lot of them can eat soy lecithin and not have a problem at all. And you see soy lecithin in a lot of food products, but that's a different thing.
Okay.
Than lectins themselves.
Okay.
So
cook it and get rid of them, basically.
Cook them, and it's not a problem. And some of your holistically minded physicians will let you know if lectins are a problem. For most people, I mean, in my career, with the exception of like 2 or 3 people where we got them on a nightshade free diet, right? and where they weren't eating eggplant or green peppers or tomatoes or potatoes or anything like that, and their symptoms got better. But that doesn't mean that they have to avoid that stuff for the rest of their life. They just need to give their body a break from it.
Was there a common theme between those groups of people? Like anything in particular that predisposes you, other than eating a lot of lectin? I get that.
If you have a compromised gut function, that can definitely predispose you. But usually my first sign of that is if let's say somebody's coming in with achy joints. This is stereotypically the way it happens. And you go through their diet and they're like, oh yeah, I love eggplant. I eat it all the time. I eat it at least every day of the week. And I've actually had people tell me that. And I love eggplant too, but I certainly don't eat it that much. However, if that's the case and they're coming in with that, that's probably a clue that they need to, back off of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So contextual clues mainly.
Yeah. Anyway, anything else?
I think that's quite a education on the tomato.
Yep, the tomato. Love your tomatoes. Make your tomato sauce.
Sensitive topic around Keone. Careful with
it. That's right.
Don't take them to any Italian
tomatoes. Improve your health, and whatever you do, don't talk bad about the tomato anymore, okay?
All right. We'll see you next week, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. And Keone,
take care, everybody.
We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Bye.